Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I look at pre-constructed decks from Magic the Gathering's history and just talk about them and get my thoughts on them. So in this one I am looking at the last pre-constructed deck from Tempest block, which is the Swarm, which is this green-white deck. So let's take a look at it. So here we have the deck list. 26 creatures, 3 instants, 23 lands, 5 enchantments, 3 sorceries. Weirdly small land count compared to most precons. Most have 24 or 25. So it's weird. This one has 23 and also has the highest mana curve. It tops off at 6, whereas all the others have topped off at 5. So I just thought that's weird. But 26 creatures. So it's pretty clear what this deck's going to try to do. It's obviously like go wide with a lot of creatures. That's kind of classic green-white. So let's dive into it. Let's start looking at all these creatures, I suppose. So yeah, pretty good sort of variety of stuff. So we have a Crackling, which comes in with X+1/+1 counters and regenerates. It's pretty standard. 3 Trained Hummadon, which is 3/3 for 3. This was kind of big news back in the day because it was a 3/3 for 3, which is quite sweet. It was a big deal back in the day. And these days we have stuff like what's the one in New Capenna? Jewel Thief, which is like a 3/3 Vigilance Trample and makes a treasure token, and it's 2 colours and a green. I don't know. It's just we've come a long way. Pincher Beetles is 3/1 Shroud, which is fine. And then Ranger Envec. I think this guy's actually pretty good. Or maybe not good, but like pretty solid. I mean, like at the time it would have been like, I think pretty good. 1 white green, like first strike and 1 mana to regenerate. That's okay. I think that's pretty good. And 2 of him, which is nice. Elven Warhounds. This is one of the rares of the deck. Kind of a weird effect we don't really ever see in green. So if it gets blocked, put the creatures that blocked it back onto the owner's library. Quite an interesting effect. We do only see that in blue these days. So interesting to see that effect. Obviously that combo is like super well with like a lure effect, which unfortunately there aren't any in this deck. But yeah, kind of like a weird, cool little strange card there in green. Rootwala. This is, I think, the first Rootwala. He's not as famous as his was the one from Odyssey, Torment, even Basking Rootwala. He's the more popular Rootwala. This is the OG Rootwala. Muscle Sliver. I talked about slivers in the last episode, which was the slivers deck. This is Muscle Sliver is the reason why that deck should have been triple color, in my opinion. Just so it could have had a playset of these. But yeah, it's just because all your slivers +1/+1, so it's a 2/2 when it comes out. You have 2 of them, it's 3/3. One thing about the old slivers is that the effects are symmetrical, so it does affect opponent slivers as well, which is maybe not ideal. Because you don't want to play a card that helps out your opponent. But a lot of effects at this time in Magic's history were symmetrical. There was. We'll discover actually if I keep doing this series, and I hope I do. We'll pin down the moment where that design flips and cards stop being symmetrical. It's usually like enchantment effects or tribal effects like this, where instead of affecting everything on the board, it affects just your stuff, which is obviously how it should be, I think. But yeah, Muscle Sliver. I'm just going to really point out the art. I have no idea why this sliver looks like a xenomorph, like from Aliens. I guess Richard Kane Ferguson got a different design brief to the other artists, and he was just like, I'm going to draw a cool alien. It's just weird. And Sky Shroud Elf, which is just a little mana fixer dork. I think it's actually pretty good, because I misread it at first. I thought his filter ability, where you pay 1 to add white or red, was a tap ability. It's not. It's actually much better than that. You can pay as much as you want. So having 3 of these with kind of this unlimited filtering ability, I think actually it's meant to be a 2-color deck. It really isn't. It's really heavily leaning towards green. There's only a few white cards in it, but I think this is okay, like as a filter, because normally when it's a filter, it's usually just a once per turn thing, like it's like just 1 and tap or whatever. So it being unlimited is actually pretty cool, and you can tap it, get the green, and then immediately turn it into white or red. So yeah, I just think it's pretty cool. Some white creatures. 3 Master Decoy. Got to have Master Decoy. Talked about it a bit in the Deep Freeze, but yeah, pretty good creature. Obviously, 1 mana to shut down like a big attacker or a big blocker. Really, really good. Does make the game sort of slow down. But yeah, it's great. I mean, not much more to say about that. Solitary Trooper. 1/1 with Shadow, but gets +1/+1 it attacks. We talked about Shadow quite a bit. Quick reminder, he can, as you can see by the text, he can only block or be blocked by creatures with Shadow. So most of the time basically means just he's unblockable. 2/2 unblockable isn't terrible. And then Solitary Crusader, 2/1 with Shadow, and weirdly is a white creature with like a fire breathing ability, which is weird, but I mean, it's fine. So then we have a few instants. So we have Anoint, which is a spell with buyback. Again, we talked about buyback. It's going to be showing up in the Tempest block precons, but buyback is you pay an extra cost when you play the spell. If you do, you get the spell back in your hand, so you can cast it again. Which usually just means you end up playing the same spell over and over again, which is like a little bit of a boring play experience. But it was it was. It's for the first kind of incarnation of this like kind of mechanic. I think it's okay. I think flashback is a lot better. We essentially get the same spell twice, or I would say even maybe retrace. Anyway, we'll cover stuff like flashback and retrace when we get to them. But Anoint is just prevents some damage, which is kind of like honestly a bit of a weak effect. Disenchant, classic disenchant, just good bit of utility, and Elvish Fury pump spell with buyback, which is fine. I would have liked to see a couple more of Elvish Fury in this, just because for like a deck with a lot of creatures going wide is very short on combat tricks. And then we have Needlestorm, which does 4 damage to a creature with flying. Just because there's not a lot of ways in this deck to deal with flyers. I think this would have dealt with pretty much every creature with flying in the set. Because creatures were generally like a lot smaller at this time in Magic's history than they are now. So 4 damage would have been pretty significant. And would have dealt with, I say, most of them. Maybe, what is it? I think Wrathy Dragon was a 5/5, so that would have survived it. But everything else, this would have been a sweep. Overrun, 2 of these, which is good in a deck where you have a lot of creatures. Yep, +3/+3, trample into turn. This is a game ender, or at the very least, it's going to swing things like so much in your direction. I always thought the Carl Critchlow art was the original art for Overrun, but no, it was this. This is okay. I prefer the Carl Critchlow art. But yeah, really good effect, really like Overrun. And then Vec Township. So this is a dual land similar to the one we saw in the Slivers deck, where it's kind of like a bad dual land, where it can give you green or white, but it doesn't untap during your next untap step, so it basically exerts. But in retrospective, it does come in untapped, so you can use it straight away. It does give you colours if you want to use it the turn. So like it doesn't come in tapped and you can't use it for a turn, so you sort of stay on curve. So yeah, I don't think it's as bad as it looks initially, but I mean it's still not great. But yeah, non-basic lands usually. Well, no, I was going to say non-basic lands were pretty bad at the time, but there was stuff like from Alpha, Bayou, and stuff. But anyway, going off on a tangent there about non-basic lands. And then we have some enchantments, and I'm going to spend a little time talking about these enchantments. So pacifism, whatever, we know pacifism. Recycle. So this is the most expensive card in the deck. 4 colors, double green. Skip your draw phase. Whenever you play a card, draw a card, and your maximum hand size is 2. This is, I think, very, very strong. There was a color shifted version of this in, I think, Planar Chaos. It was black, and I can't remember what it's called, Null Procession or something like that. But basically, yeah, it's the same thing but in black. I think this is a really, really strong card. Especially have a deck with kind of like a lot of cheap creatures and cheap spells where you can just then like really like chainsaw your way through the deck. Like you play something, draw something, play it. So yeah, recycle I think is really, really strong. But not as strong as Allurin, I think is how you pronounce it, Allurin. So So Alurin makes this deck the kind of the rat's nest of its day. If you don't know, Rat's Nest was a precon that came out in Kamigawa, and we'll get to it. And it had one copy of like a really good rare card, Umezawa's Jite, which made it like really, which was like one of the most sought after cards at the time, and it made Rat's Nest disproportionately popular because people would buy it because there was a guaranteed Jite in it. So the Swarm with Alurin is kind of the rat's nest of its day, because Alurin is a like bonkers, so bonkers good. 2 colors, 2 green. I mean, it's laid off by its symmetrical effect, but so any player can cast creature cards with mana value 3 or less for free, and whenever they could play instants. Which is, I mean, if you have that in the same time at the same time as recycle, pretty much every creature in this deck has a mana value 3 or less. So you would just essentially just drop your whole deck like the turn this happens, you know. It's crazy good. I think it's only been reprinted. I don't think it's I was going to say it's going to be reprinted. It hasn't been reprinted. I think this is its only printing. Yeah, this is like a $90 card. So if you ever wanted to like try and recreate these Tempest decks to play them, which would be a fun thing, be aware Alurin is maybe proxy Alurin, because it's very very strong. Shows up like in a lot of, I think, vintage combo decks. I think there was a combo with like Cavern Harpy where you would play it and bounce it and do kind of get infinite into the battlefield triggers. But yeah, crazy that this was in a pre-constructed deck, but I guess, you know, like at the time they just didn't know it was going to be that good. Because, you know, think, oh well, it's symmetrical, you know, it benefits everyone. But the thing is, like, if you obviously build a deck planned around abusing it, it's obviously much stronger for the person who plays it. Yeah, crazy card to have in a pre-constructed deck. So then, like, what could have been? So as we saw, there's kind of like more of a emphasis on green cards rather than white cards. You know, we didn't see that many white cards. I would have liked a sort of a more even split. So this, so at the top we just have like some basic white and green creatures that I think could have gone in. Advanced Scout has first strike, gives other things first strike. Canopy Spider is just a 1/3 with reach. Elite Javelineer is a 2/2, and when it attacks or blocks, it does 1 damage to something. And Secret Skybreak is a 2/1 that taps to untap something else, which is pretty good. And then at the bottom here, just some extra rares that could have gone in. So Field of Souls, you have like a lot of creatures. You know, when a non-token creature dies, it gets replaced with a 1/1 Spirit with Flying, which is pretty good. You essentially double dip out of your creatures. Gerard's Battlecry. This is kind of like what was it in Mirrodin? The Leonin Sun Standard. It's like the proto this. So you drop this really early on, and then you just have like this permanent like board wide pump ability, which would have fit, I think, quite well in this deck. And then Mongrel Pack, which is I'd never heard of this card before, but when I was kind of like researching what the potential cards could have been in this deck, so it's a 4/1. If it dies during combat, you get 4 1/1 dog tokens, which is pretty fun. Again, just a way to keep adding to your board even if something dies. But I think like overall, it's a pretty solid deck. I mean, like, it's hard to go wrong with kind of like a lot of green-white creatures and go wide. You know, a few more like pump spells like Combat Tricks would have been fine. But, you know, what's that? You got a couple of overruns, which is fine. Obviously, you know, having Alluring and recycling that is crazy. Like, you know, if they came down, you've basically won, I think, if that happens. But yeah, overall, I think this is pretty good. I don't think it would have been as good as Deep Freeze out of the 4 Tempest decks, but this would have been like a pretty solid second place, I think. So yeah, that's all the Tempest pre-constructed decks. Yeah, really good fun looking at these. Next episode, I'm going to start looking at the next block, which is Stronghold, and we'll have some fun looking at those. But I don't know, I'd like to hear if you ever had this deck and used it. Was the Allure and Recycle combo as crazy as it looks on paper? Like, stick a comment below. I'd like to hear about it. But yeah, next time we'll be looking at Stronghold decks. Thanks for listening.